few of you who are new, we are working with the El Camino ministry here, part of the team with the Spanish-speaking ministry. And what else are we doing? I still do a little bit with Promet, although I'm retired.
We lived in Venezuela for a while.
Right. And we were missionaries in Venezuela with Reach Global. Yep. Psalm 62:5 says, "For God alone, O my soul, wait in silence, for my hope is from him."
The last part of that verse, I think, is really important because it says, "My hope is in him." And where would we be in our times of waiting if we didn't have that hope in God, that he was working, he was doing things in his time, he's sovereign, and whatever happens, it's going to be his best and for our best. We have, several stories of waiting. I think we start out, of when I was single still, and I'd been working in Minneapolis. I'd had a heart for missions, but I just couldn't figure out if God wanted me there. I prayed one day, God, send somebody to help me. And actually, God sent Jonathan Olson's grandma and grandpa, and they were the ones that wrote me and said, hey, we could use a teacher in Africa, and that's where I went. And then my dad said, well, what about getting married, what do you And I was like, well, if God can take care of me in Africa, he can take care of that. But I was there waiting, wondering if God would send me somebody to minister with.
Meanwhile, I was single in Venezuela, and I was waiting too.
But we came back, both of us, to Camp Chaminade, and we met, and we got married. And before long, we were off together to Venezuela. When we were in Venezuela, we have 3 children. All 3 of them were born in Venezuela. Our youngest is Jonathan. When he was about 4 years old, though we could tell he was really an intelligent kid, he was learning things so fast, but there were some parts of his development, communication and social skills, that were behind. And it took a little while for us to figure out, waiting, what's going on, and he had a diagnosis of autism. And even though there were some ways we found out in Venezuela that things that would be able to help and support Jonathan, we really felt that God was calling us back to the U.S.
And so we came back to the Fairmont area and closer to Carolyn's family, and it did find a lot of help for Jonathan at that time.
But that time, that was devastating. When we came back to the U.S., I was so stressed. I wished I could go out in the middle of the field and scream because I couldn't understand why God was bringing us back to the U.S., why our son was going to meet and be struggling. I knew he was going to struggle for his whole life, and I couldn't understand what's happening to our missionary career. Why, God? It was all up in the air.
We wondered what was the future like, and we came back to the States. The mission decided to keep us on, and we had a ministry. I was ministering to churches. It was a networking with the mission and local churches. It was doing team leader training. Wasn't quite my first love. I mean, I did it and did it gladly.
In fact, it was kind of like being a salesman, and that was not Tim's gifts. His gifts were teaching the Bible and church planning. That's what we did in Venezuela.
Around this time, the Bethel Free Church was thinking about starting a Spanish-speaking ministry. Pastor Rich and Pastor Steve had this in their heart. But there was one thing they didn't have, and that was some people who spoke Spanish who could spearhead that ministry.
So we were invited to join the church here in the Hispanic ministry, which has now become El Camino. About this time, Prometa, which is a training program for Latin Americans, church leaders, Spanish-speaking church leaders around the world at a master's level. It was just being developed, it was growing, and they needed another professor. This was a program that was founded by some of our missionary colleagues. And they contacted Tim and said, hey, Tim, we need another faculty member. So Tim joined the faculty. And so God was redeeming what we had lost, really, in Venezuela. Tim was now teaching, and we were church planting. And the other special thing that we had was that God When we were in Venezuela, we worked with a team, and God provided that too. I'm going to let you tell about that.
So we, after we had begun the Spanish ministry, Miriam and her husband Heriberto came and joined us. And we just enjoyed working together. Our gifts meshed with one another, and we were part of a team again. You know, as the years passed, we've had other people, Ted and Julie Kautzman, Mark Lindberg, and now Abraham and Cynthia, along with Marianne, are working with us, and we get to be a part of a team, which has been God's gift to us.
So as we reflected back, God had, though we had waited, and we even had felt some shame at having to leave the mission field, but we saw that in our waiting, God had provided really just exactly what we had been doing in Venezuela, but now we were doing here with the experience of having lived in another country. And we can only thank God for that, for what he provided for us and what we're really still doing today. As I said, our youngest, Jonathan, was diagnosed with autism when he was about 4 years old. He worked really hard through school. Even in preschool, he came home and worked 2 extra hours at home every day. It was a challenge, but God sent a lot of people along his way, including an amazing piano teacher, which is another story if you ever want to know it. But he got through school, not quite the right fit, but he did graduate. But afterwards, it was like, now what? I knew this kid could do more. I knew he could learn more social skills, but we just didn't know what direction to go.
Then we heard about a school called Shepherd's College. It was a vocational training school for adults with disabilities. It was in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, or near Milwaukee. That's a long ways away. We wondered, should we take a look at it? We'll always wonder if we didn't go. Well, we never tried it out, so we'll go. Probably come to nothing. And Jonathan and Carolyn and I went, and we saw what they were doing out there, and this is it. This is a great place for Jonathan, and he too, he wanted to come.
He had a couple nights that he had to do an overnight to see if he would fit, and we wondered if he would, but he did, and they accepted him. So in August, we headed down to Wisconsin and moved him in, and I tell you, moving your special needs kid into college is a lot different than moving your typical kid into college. It was an anxious time, and we left him, and we came back, and that night, I remember just kind of losing it as I sat on the couch, and we realized we'd never been in our house one night without Jonathan. And now it was just the two of us. I mean, that wasn't all bad, but it was kind of an overwhelming feeling. And the other thing was, it's like, is he really going to make it? I was afraid that they would kick him out.
I was afraid he would quit.
But Shepherd's College isn't like that. If you're accepted, they're going to work with you. And it's amazing if you ever want to know more about it. But they have all of the skills and all the experience to teach these kids what they need to do, life skills, and to get you learn how to live with a roommate, learn how to get up in time for class, and they had to check in for class, and a lot of other things, and even how to eat new foods.
Jonathan did not like fruits and vegetables. And there are a lot of other things he didn't like to eat. So this was a bit of a bump along the road. He lost 20 pounds his first semester.
He's not underweight 20 pounds anymore. But now he eats Brussels sprouts and broccoli, you guys, and spinach. I had to learn how to cook Brussels sprouts. But anyway, it was cool that he learned to like new foods, but that wasn't the biggest thing. He learned how to live. He learned social skills. He learned technology skills. He learned how to try, besides new foods, he learned how to try a lot of other things for the first time. And it was a wonderful experience.
So we did have a little bump with COVID again and brought him home and had to do online for a few weeks. That we saw some of the great things that they were doing. Second year, third year, about along October, we got a call and say, we're thinking maybe Jonathan's ready to move into his own apartment. And most of the last year, he was in his own apartment, doing almost all his own cooking, cleaning, getting up in the morning with an alarm. Amazing.
It was amazing. No, he's not without issues, after his graduation, but it was a huge change in life. I remember thinking probably when he was about 7 years old. He needs a Helen Keller and Sullivan experience where he can just go away with somebody and just focus on the skills he needs. And after he was at Shepherd's College, I thought, that is Jonathan's Ann Sullivan, Helen Keller experience, and the Lord provided it about 20 years later. And it just made a huge difference in his life. He got a growth mindset was one of the biggest things they taught him.
After moving home, back to Fairmont, Jonathan was busy doing a few things, but he had felt that his future might be in the Twin Cities. We talked about this, and we thought maybe that is good. As we prayed about it, about a year ago, actually a little over a year ago, Jonathan moved to Eden Prairie, another big move. And they found a good place for him to live, and he's been involved in a lot of activities. And there was one thing that was a priority for us, and that was that he would find a church to connect with. And he wanted to go to church every Sunday, and that became kind of a problem. There was a great church in Eden Prairie. It was a disabilities ministry, large church. But he wasn't getting rides to church. We were always every Sunday, how is he going to get to church? And it was such a big church that if he got there, there was no one to receive him. It just wasn't working for him. And
Brian Frone.
That's right, Brian Frone. So I was at a meeting of Free Church pastors. Brian Frone, our district superintendent, was there, and I was happening to tell him about Jonathan. He said, "Have you tried Prairie Hill Church?" Prairie Hill Church. That's in Eden Prairie. So we looked it up.
As soon as Tim got home, I Googled it to find out how far it was from Jonathan's house. 4 minutes. 4 minutes away from the house Jonathan had been living in for a year. Well, we went up to visit a couple weeks later, and we thought, well, let's go see what this church looks like. This is a true story, you guys. We drove into the parking lot, and I said to Tim, now, if we were like Gary, who was my amazing missionary brother-in-law, who was very outgoing, I said, if we were like him, we would go in that church, and we'd just go up and meet the pastor and stuff, but I was thinking, what am I going to do? Go in there and say, I'm a missionary for the Free Church. I have a special needs kids who lives over there. Can he come to your church? I was like, I'm not going to do that. I'm too embarrassed. I said, I'm not going in there.
And I said, I'm going in.
And I said, I'm staying in the car.
I walked into the church looking for the pastor, and there around a table was the pastor, the youth pastor, the children's director, and I think one or two other ministry leaders having Galentine's cookies. So I just joined the group, shared our story, and they said, we'd love to have Jonathan come. I said, he might talk during your sermon. The pastor said, no problem.
That would be just fine. So I missed out on that because I didn't go in. But anyway, another story would be how the Lord has taught me recently how to get over that shame, by the way, but we don't have time to share that, but that's something. I have a whole different outlook now. But anyway, 2 or 3 weeks later, we visited the church, made a call to the pastor afterward. He said, Jonathan should be in church every Sunday. And he talked to their parish nurse that they have, and she lined up people to pick Jonathan up every week and to sit with him in church every week. And I tell you, we were so overwhelmed to see the church had that kind of a heart for people that were different. We have had a kink. There was an issue that came up, but they contacted us. We told them some more about Jonathan, and the problem got resolved. And something that really touched my heart was just a couple of weeks ago, we got this letter from the nurse. Tim wrote to ask how it was going, if things were working out, and she said, our heart's desire to learn and adapt to our changing world and become welcoming to what may be uncomfortable simply because it's unfamiliar. Jonathan is being used by God to that effect. Thank you. And I just really touched to see not only are they ministering to Jonathan, but they see that Jonathan is ministering to them and helping them learn to be more of the church that they want to be. So God has really been faithful.
Now we continue to wait. We have matters for which we continue to wait. As we think of our adult children, and for Jonathan, he is looking for more work. He has just a few hours he's working each week, and so we're waiting on God for that. Maybe just during the last 10 days, a couple things have happened that lead us to be hopeful. We continue to wait on Jonathan. Jonathan has a lot of questions about his faith. He has this mind that continues to ask questions, and it gets kind of tiresome sometimes trying to keep up with him. But we wait on God for him to come to a deeper assurance in his faith.
And we have ministry issues that we wait on God for, and we have personal issues too that we wait on God for. But when we see how God could turn around a devastating situation for us when we came home from Venezuela, we can see where he brought Jonathan just the right training at just the right time, and then a church where he could not only be ministered to, but have a part in serving the people. We just know that we can, even though it's hard still sometimes, we can trust God for the future because of what he's done in the past.
For God alone my soul waits in silence. In him is my hope. God is faithful.